Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Fox 45 News In Depth. I'm Mikenzie Frost. We're continuing our investigation into the state's Department of Human Services and concerns surrounding Maryland's foster care system. It comes after the death of 16-year-old Kanaya Ward in a Baltimore hotel under state care. In October of 2025, Fox 45 News filed a public records request to try and uncover more information about Ward's death. We obtained a copy of the investigative report showing the lengthy history working with the Department of Social Services. This investigative report provides new insight into the history of concerns the family of Kanaya Ward had for her health and safety. Ward's family was looking for help. The young teen had a history of mental health challenges. In 2019, the family was given various information about family therapy, support groups, and medication management. In the summer of 2022, while living in Prince George's County with her family, a juvenile court determined Ward needed assistance. She was placed in the temporary custody of the Prince George's Department of Social Services. That set off a series of various therapies and placements, school visits, court hearings, appointments, and meetings. She was able to spend several months at home. In March of 2024, Ward was admitted for inpatient psychiatric care following a self-harm behavior and attempted suicide. One-on-one services were contracted by the Department of Human Services in June of 2024, and shortly after, Ward was moved to a new placement setting. By September, she was sent to a new placement. In November, Ward started working with Fenwick Behavioral Services for the first time. A glimpse of normalcy for the teenage girl in April of 2025, a college visit in Florida as her one-on-one aide tagged along. In July, Ward said she wanted to be done with social services, but her time working with the state was not complete. In August, Ward was discharged from a residential program in Baltimore City with 72 hours notice. DHS says Prince George's County Social Services tried to get Ward into 5 different facilities, but no one would accept her. She was placed in a hotel in Baltimore in the meantime. While a student at Augusta Fells, Ward was suspended in early September. Ward was scheduled for a second mental health evaluation at an outpatient mental health clinic on September 22nd, but she never made it to that appointment. The weekend of September 20th, Fenwick faced staffing shortages. The supervisor watching Ward was supposed to work a 24-hour shift starting Saturday at 10 in the morning. But the next person set to stay with Ward Sunday called out sick, and the supervisor was told to work until 3 p.m. Monday. When the worker went to wake Ward up at 5:45 in the morning on September 22nd, according to DHS's report, Ward responded but didn't get up. The employee did not come back until after 10 in the morning, and Ward was not breathing. She was pronounced dead by medics at 11:01 a.m. The investigation revealed 3 staff members at Fenwick responsible for neglecting Ward. The findings were sent to the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office for review, but the top prosecutor declined to bring charges.
Hey, everybody. Happy New Year.
Days after the report was released, we questioned Governor Wes Moore for the first time about the latest findings. How can you ensure that the children in the state's care are protected and will be cared for when contractors hired by DHS are found negligent?
Yeah, I mean, what happened to Mrs. Ward is a tragedy. And I've said it before, and I will continue to say it, it's unacceptable. It's something that is of the utmost importance. I believe there needs to be accountability for what happened to Ms. Ward, and it's the reason that why we have referred this to the local state's attorney for further examination. The state's attorney's office is declining to bring criminal charges involved. What does accountability look like then? Well, I can't speak to open cases, nor can I speak to the state's attorney. My personal belief, there has to be accountability for what happened to Ms. Ward. What accountability means for the governor is not clear, but we did question Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates about why his office is not pursuing charges.
So we can't hold this worker responsible criminally from what we could tell.
And the company, did they play a role in this? The person who employed this person?
Well, look, without going into the civil lawsuit, I'm sure some attorneys already jumped on it. I think there are some concerns and I can understand why a civil attorney would potentially file a lawsuit.
So far, a civil lawsuit has not been filed, while the Department of Human Services Secretary Rafael Lopez has made policy changes ending hotel placements for foster care children, and he also pledges to protect kids.
Inspired by Governor Moore's vision to end childhood poverty in Maryland, our team has moved with urgency and innovation to leave no one behind.
There are lingering questions about how the agency plans to ensure the safety of Maryland's children under the state's care. Now, the latest report comes after months of controversy surrounding Maryland's foster care system and DHS. Weeks before Kanaya Ward's death, a scathing audit found a lack of background checks for people working with foster care children. The audit showed the 7 registered sex offenders with the same addresses as guardianship homes housing a total of 10 children. It also found unlicensed providers were caring for more than 250 children during the period of the audit. 6 weeks later, state lawmakers met in Annapolis for a hearing about the problems brought up in that audit. During the hearing, DHS Secretary Rafael Lopez argued his department inherited the issues from the previous administration. But critics say he should have acted on those problems as soon as he became aware of them.
You all knew you had problems, yet those problems continued for quite a long time. And we lost a life. And we don't even know what happened to the other kids in hotels. I'm not so sure a hotel is a thing. I think the process and the attention and the care might have been the problem there and how we address things. So I'm a little concerned. Why weren't these first on your list to address?
There's a possibility that my answer will not be satisfactory to you, sir. My heart is broken over this death. And I ask myself every single day, if we had moved differently and faster on any number of issues, would this precious life still be alive?
Ahead of that hearing, a state work group was supposed to come up with recommendations to help kids in unlicensed settings by October 1st, but that didn't happen. So I asked State Senator Shelley Heddleman, chair of the Joint Audit and Evaluations Committee, what was behind the delay. I'm glad you brought up the work group because I know that initially the work group was supposed to publish the report by October 1st, and I believe they didn't have their first meeting until October 2nd. Do you know why that was delayed?
I don't. I'm not on the work group, and I don't know the background of it.
Joining me now to talk about the work group and all of the effort in that space is Laura Edwards, the chair of the group and the state director for the Maryland CASA Association. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Mikenzie. I appreciate it.
Now, Laura, the last time we spoke, we talked a little bit about the work group getting off the ground and starting to meet. Can you give us a little progress report on what's been happening?
Absolutely. We worked ferociously through the holidays, as you can imagine, with legislative sessions starting up January 14th. It was critical that all of our subgroups work to provide the data and the information that they were tasked with. We feel like we're in a very comfortable position. In fact, we just got off of a call giving a high-level exposed brief to Senator Bidel and Chair Bagnall and Vice Chair Cullison. We believe that we'll have a brief for them. We have another meeting with the work group on January the 12th, of which we'll go through the final sets of recommendations that we can include in this interim report. Now, keep in mind, this is still the interim report, right? This is not an easy process. It's not a process that we've taken lightly. The full report will come out in April, but we will have the brief provided for them so that we can impact legislative this session.
What type of recommendations or, ideas will the work group be putting forward for lawmakers? As you mentioned, obviously session is starting in just a few days, and I think a lot of people are looking at this and wondering what type of changes the General Assembly will be making when it comes to unauthorized or unlicensed settings and really the foster care system overall.
Absolutely. We've tried to break them down into 3 categories. So we've got some short-term recommendations that we can impact and we can have a legislative impact quick hits. We've also done actions that don't require legislation. There's a lot of things that we can be doing in collaboration with Governor's Office for the Children and DHS collectively. And then third, there's the long-term recommendations. So we've tried to break those down into all 3 of those categories, with the primary focus on that short term and those actions that don't require legislation. simple things, right? Secretary Lopez in 2023 at a conference stated, I can track my pizza, but I can't track our youth in the state. That's a problem. There's a solution out there. There are ways to track the number of beds available within the state. We just need to come together. And the biggest thing, and I spoke about this the last time, is we need accountability and collaboration.
Yeah, when it comes to the accountability portion of this conversation, I think people generally are looking at the tragedy that happened with Kanaya Ward and are wondering what is going to change. And we know that DHS did make some policy changes by ending the hotel placements for foster care children. But what other immediate steps towards accountability can the public expect to see to ensure that something like that never happens again?
So they did. They said effectively November 24th there will be no more no more hotel stays. We're still dealing with hospital overstays.
Yeah.
We have the numbers, and it's been crazy that we've been able to uncover. First of all, finding data has been our biggest hurdle. The DHS has its set of data. Then you have the 2-on-1 system that has their set of data. The Hospital Association has their set of data. Everybody's operating in spreadsheets, which is, in my opinion, not an acceptable way to be managing the youth across our state. To take a look at that, 74 days is the current average stay for a youth in a hospital. That's not acceptable. So from an accountability perspective, the first thing we can all agree that's not going to cost us anything is let's get together and share what data we actually have instead of keeping everything so siloed. That's, again, trying to marry up the data, getting spreadsheets from everybody, and then trying to marry up because there's privacy laws and there's things like that. So names can't always be shared across different organizations. That's the biggest thing in my opinion.
Sharing information does seem to be one of the biggest hurdles, and we hear that from advocacy groups and even lawmakers and people in every single aspect of this space. Are you surprised? You've been working in this space for a long time. Are you surprised that we're finally at a point where people are saying we need to share this information and it looks like perhaps it finally will take place?
Here's hoping. It's been talked about for decades, right? We need to share data. That it's not new to the child welfare industry. It's not new to other industries. The fact is that if you don't have the data, you can't measure anything accurately. And if you can't measure anything actively, you can't impact change effectively. It starts with that data, and it starts with all of these organizations stopping their habit of keeping things so close to the vest.
Yeah.
This is Maryland's youth. We need to be doing something different.
Yeah. Laura Edwards, looking forward to seeing what those recommendations are next week. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm sure we will be continuing this conversation as session unfolds. Thank you.
Thanks, Mikenzie. Thanks for having us on again.
One lawmaker pushing for change, Maryland State Delegate Mike Griffith, says he's planning to introduce new legislation this session to regulate the foster care system. Griffith, who spent much of his teen years in the foster care system himself, is proposing the Never Again Act of 2026, also called Kanaya's Law. The bill would require training, licensing, and criminal background checks for DHS providers. It would also prohibit placing foster care children in hotels for more than a week without DHS review and authorization. DHS previously said there were 2 foster care children in the state housed in a youth shelter, which Griffith calls unacceptable.
I mean, I think it's horrifying, and we continue to have the conversation about how these kids feel like they're second-class citizens. And we've already learned that what's going on with these kids in these hotel rooms, we know we can do better than that. But the homeless shelters, it's absolutely unbelievable. And it's one of those things that we never thought we'd have to pass a law to address. And now we're faced having to try to find a way to prohibit putting our foster kids in homeless shelters.
Still to come, lawmakers are considering several bill proposals heading into next legislative session. How some of Maryland's top prosecutors are reacting to the push to end automatic charging for juveniles. As we approach this year's legislative session, lawmakers are also gearing up to tackle juvenile crime. One topic up for debate is whether to automatically charge juveniles as adults for certain violent offenses. Some state Democrats are pushing an effort to end the automatic charging. One of the lawmakers leading the charge is Delegate Sandy Bartlett, chair of the House Judiciary Committee. I reached out to her to talk about that proposal. In a statement, Delegate Bartlett says she and Senator Will Smith, who leads the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee, will be co-sponsoring a bill to reduce the instances where juveniles are charged as adults, calling the system ineffective. She points out the issues tied to automatic charging, including a lack of resources for kids in adult detention and slower processing for cases. Bartlett also says children placed in adult detention are often placed in restricted housing, formerly known as solitary confinement, for up to 24 hours a day. She says this bill she's planning to sponsor will work in conjunction with her bill to try and keep kids out of adult detention. But prosecutors across the state are speaking out against that push to end automatic charging. I spoke with Carroll County State's Attorney Haven Shoemaker, who says the lack of consequences for the most violent juvenile offenders could put the public at risk.
I think there has to be a balance for juveniles who commit the most heinous of offenses. In other words, I've always subscribed to the theory that if you commit big boy crimes, you should probably do big boy time. And lost in this whole discussion, and Annapolis does this often, is what about the victims? What about the victims of juvenile crime? Is anybody eliciting input from them? Because I guarantee you they would have a starkly different point of view than that advanced by the advocates for changing the system that's already in place.
Now joining me now to talk more about the automatic charging is Howard County State's Attorney Rich Gibson. Rich, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Mikenzie. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Now, why do you think this issue continues to surface year after year? We had a similar proposal last year, and I know that was not successful, and here it is again.
Unfortunately, some ideas don't go away, and it's just an ongoing issue. I think it's a very, it's a controversial topic, and it needs to be discussed. There are strong feelings on both sides about whether automatic charging should be or should not be present. Obviously, the prosecutors of the state are focused on victims, and we do not agree with the idea that every case should start in juvenile for a number of reasons. And so that's really where we are.
What do you say to supporters of this effort who argue most of these cases end up in the juvenile system anyway, so why not just start there?
So several things. I think, first of all, we need time to properly evaluate the case to decide where it belongs. The juvenile system moves extremely fast. You're talking typically, 30 days, 60 days before it's resolved. So much tighter time span for really assessing the case and really getting a feel for what's going on with this individual in the community. In the adult system, we have more time to properly vet the case and properly assess. If after evaluating the case, we decide it should be handled in juvenile, that's a totally different issue.
Mm-hmm. I know you and other states' attorneys have talked extensively about the need for more programming within the Department of Juvenile Services. You and I have talked about this. Do you believe that has improved at all, or is that still a concern for you as part of the reason why perhaps maybe this should not move forward?
Oh, it's a massive concern, right? DJS is well-intended and there are partners. We want them to succeed. But the reality is that they don't have the appropriate services. They don't have the appropriate people in placement. They don't have the appropriate resources and placement facilities for kids committing crime. And when you're trying to give more resources to an entity that's struggling with their current load, that seems to defy logic, which is part of our opposition to this idea of automatic jurisdiction.
And the issue, too, of being able to wave up and wave down, I know that has come up before. Is it more difficult if the case starts in the juvenile system to then bring it to the adult system if necessary?
Absolutely. So typically the terminology is waiver and transfer, right? A case that starts in juvenile and is waived up to adult court, or it's transferred from adult court back to juvenile in terms of the directionality of movement. The burden of proof. So what entity has the burden to prove the case changes depending upon if it's a waiver or a transfer hearing. In a transfer hearing, how it is right now, the defendant and defense counsel have the burden of proof. Why that's important is because they have access, the defense counsel has access to the defendant's family, the defendant's records. They can talk to their client and then advocate from a place of having information. In a waiver hearing, right, the state has the burden of proof, but we don't have access to the defendant. The defendant has Fifth Amendment rights. We don't have access to the defendant's family. We can't get the same information. And so it's really hard for us to put on a case when we don't have access to the information.
That is interesting, and I know obviously this is going to come up again, so we will likely talk to you again as session gets underway. Rich Gibson, State's Attorney for Howard County, really appreciate your time and insight. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you. Have a great year.
This week we asked what lawmakers should do about automatic charging for juveniles. We'll take a look at what some of your responses were after the break. This week we asked, what should lawmakers do about automatic charging for juveniles? Let's take a look at what some of you had to say. Richard says, well, it depends on the crime. Some young people will do stupid things on their own or with dares. Others are involved in more intense crimes, so there should be a minimum. Then we have Glenda who says, charge them. This soft behavior on them is why they continue committing crimes. Jeff says, actually charge them. All right, that's it for this week's edition of FOX45 News In Depth. I'm Mikenzie Frost. Hey, I'm Mikenzie Frost. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Check out Fox Baltimore on all of our social media pages for more videos just like this.